My name is Casey Duff, and today I would like to talk to you about eugenics and its rise to prominence throughout the 19th and 20th century. Now, to understand the far-reaching implications of eugenics, it is important to understand its history, its role and key figures in the United States, and its central role to the Nazi movement in Germany in the Second World War. Now, to begin, we'll start with the history. Throughout the history of humanity, selective breeding was utilized in order to create sufficient resources to support the growing population. For instance, cows were selected to produce better milk and beef, chickens were selected to produce better eggs or more eggs, and aquaculture was enhanced via selective breeding of fish. Now, all these methods of selective breeding, where a desired trait was chosen and acted upon, allowed the plants and animal and the crops to grow better and to yield better results. So we can see at this time the use of genetic engineering was essentially innocent and designed to only help support the growing human population. Now, genetic inheritance of traits were started to be observed by scientists in the 1800s, especially Charles Darwin and Gregor Mendel. Charles Darwin, in his publication of The Origin of Species in 1859, saw the survival of the fittest and how certain animals, especially the Galapagos finches, with certain traits would survive in different environments and adapt more efficiently to their surroundings. Gregor Mendel observed that certain traits could be passed down from generation to generation. So how is this applied to humans? Well, previously selective breeding was utilized in agriculture, like we spoke of earlier, in order to develop productivity. But why would it stop here? Could this be applied to the human race in order to better it? Eliminate disease and other undesirable traits? Why just stop with plants and animals? These are the questions that begin to come up with increasing understanding of the principles of inheritance and genetic role of traits. But still at this time, genetic engineering was still somewhat innocent and very limited, and people were still viewing it as a way to help humanity. Now, we fast forward to the 1800s. The world began to think about the idea of selective breeding in humans a bit more seriously. Francis J. Galton was a pattern seeker and observed that wealthy and smart people tended to marry wealthy and smart people, and their babies would also become wealthy and smart and marry wealthy and smart people. So in 1883, he further created a new term that would have a profound effect in the world of eugenics, and it was the term well-born. So here we see the idea of eugenics beginning to evolve. Galton believed that in promoting marriage among these superior and those with superior intelligence and health would improve the human species over time. But later, this definition of well-born got changed to positive eugenics. Galton was innocent and naive in his views of eugenics and highly disapproved of any efforts to make eugenics into a social action rather than a branch of science. So now the beginnings of the thoughts of eugenics as how they started out to better humanity begin to evolve to eliminate suffering and change the aspects of humanity. And in the 19th century, in the wake of the Civil War, was where eugenics in a social aspect took hold in America. And so Americans like Woodrow Wilson were haunted by the idea of mongrelization, which was the idea of crossbreeding with what he considered, or they considered at the time, as an inferior race or an inferior person. Um, this was because many other ethnicities were being incorporated into society, like the American Indians, African Americans, Hispanics, Asians. They were all being integrated into society. Further, the men that were running the country and that had been part of the Civil War brought kind of their ideals of racial superiority to their offices at the time. Theodore Roosevelt believed that it was not the strength of the strong that led the country, rather the weak link, the weak blood that led the country. He and his fellow comrades wanted good blood to lead the country, and this is where Mendel's principle of heredity came into play. And so, according to Mendel's theory, traits were inherited. So why couldn't these ideals be implemented onto human subjects like Mendel implemented on the pea? And so the goal would then be to select traits like poverty or crime and eliminate those genetic traits and get rid of the defective ancestry and breed a better human being. So thus, in 1903, the American Breeders Association, or the ABA, was established. And some members of the ABA were Alexander Graham Bell, and they were tasked with investigating and report on the heredity in the human race and establish a possibility of a superior human race. And so we can fast forward to World War II and looking at the ideals of the Nazi Party and Hitler and Germany during that time. One eugenicist, Madison Grant, wrote a book on eugenics titled The Passing of a Great Race. This book was a favorite of Hitler's, and it was even said to have been like one of his Bibles. But both men believed in National Socialism, and both also believed in eugenics and natural selection, but with the use of eugenics could, alter a race or eliminate a race. So with Germany's increasing interest in eugenics in the 20s and 30s, America began to get more bold, and German publications on eugenics were quoted and wrote on by American science journals. So Germany became a world leader in eugenics in the 30s, and the Americans began to believe that the Germans were beating them at their own game, essentially. And so it was ironic that this belief of a superior race was passed on to the Nazis, and they would later become known as Aryans. The Nazis believed the Aryans were the pinnacle of humankind. So, to conclude, though eugenics gained traction as a useful tool and a solution in regards to farming, eugenics developed into a more dark and sinister device that would be used to further political goals and to eliminate those that a country or a certain people group that they thought were inferior. And so something to take away from this is to remember that it is always important to remember the events from the past, because we don't want to be doomed to maybe someday relive them again.